to the podcast. My name is Jeff Lundgren. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I work here as a therapist. And before we get started, there's a couple of things I need to mention. First, Mormon Mental Health podcast is sustained only through your donations. It costs about a minimum of around $5,000 per year just to cover the cost. So any donation is super helpful, and your donations go directly to sustaining this podcast. You can do this at our website, which is mormonmentalhealth.org. And if you'd rather not make a financial donation, there are other ways you can help. Of course, you can like our Facebook page. You can share links to episodes that you enjoy. You can tell a friend. You can provide some comments or feedback on any of these platforms. And of course, you can always contact us and recommend topics that would be interesting to you. So that being said, I am super excited. Today we have a very special guest, and I think you're really going to just love her. And this topic is very intriguing, and it's a bit taboo, which makes it more exciting. Today we're going to have a conversation about ethical non-monogamy, and more specifically polyamory. And we're also going to talk a little bit about our guest's story and how she sees this has impacted mental health, or how mental health conditions and situations actually show up, which is quite a list, I'm sure. So just as a primer, just some history, the Mormon Church has a very interesting history with non-monogamy, which is kind of funny because they're so stringently, trying to promote, this very atomic family, nuclear family, but it wasn't always that way. Since the early days of the church, some members practice polygamy, and polygamy is where one man is married to more than one woman. And that was somewhat common. Not everybody did but some did, until around the early 19th century. And it took a couple of tries, but eventually the church denounced the practice. And when that happened, there were a few offshoots because they wanted to continue doing this. Obviously, it was probably very disruptive to families, and some people chose to kind of break out on their own. Today, the main branch of the Mormon tradition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they don't practice polygamy. They haven't endorsed it. In fact, like I said, since the early 19th century, if you were found to be practicing it, they would excommunicate you. So our guest, and I'll kind of give a little, and the history is important, but I want her to tell her own story a little bit. But it is my pleasure, and I want to introduce Andraea. Andraea, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Of course, you're very welcome. So, and were you? I know you live in Canada. Were you born in Canada as well?
Yes, born and raised in Alberta.
Okay, very good. So she grew up as a member of the church. I don't think she is a member currently, but tell us a little bit, Andraea, about your experience growing up Mormon, a little bit about what that was for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a family that has ties to the very earliest phases of the Mormon Church via Brigham Young through one of his polygamous wives, through Zina Diantha Huntington Smith Young. It's a mouthful. And Zina and her story are actually part of what for me is a very deeply personal story about the abuses within polygamy in the early Mormon church. So that is where my family has its roots, is through Zina and through one of her daughters who was sent to live in Canada with her husband, Charles Oricard, and through the family that he had there. So my family has those roots there. I have quite a bit of family who are still active members of the church, but I myself left and have not been a practicing member of the Mormon Church since I was 18 years old.
Got it. And I think it's important to know, as I laid out that history, that your involvement in the Mormon Church is the main branch of Mormonism, not one of these offshoots.
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct. My family is from the Brighamite sect of the Mormon Church, which
Okay.
is the Mormon Church in its current iteration is the closest to the Brighamite sect as it was active at the time.
Right. Okay. So, as I've indicated, you've been involved in a committed polyamorous relationship for a few years at least.
Yes, I am in two polyamorous relationships presently. My longest standing one, we're coming up on our 4th anniversary actually in the next week or so. And my primary relationship, I have been with my primary partner for just over 3 years now.
Okay.
So, which in the grand scheme of things is fairly short lived. However, in terms of commitment and really in contrast to what we see a lot of people of varying traditions fall into, it's a long time in terms of relationship perspective, especially non-monogamous relationships.
Right, for sure. And it's really interesting because as a therapist, I work with most of the clients that I have are in monogamous relationships. And it's interesting because, if you read the works of Esther Perel as an example, she talks about the definition of monogamy, that monogamy used to mean one intimate partner for your entire life. And now it's more like serial monogamy, where we'll have one partner at one time, but that doesn't mean that we're going to only
Mhm.
have one partner. But this just, I think, illustrates that the diversity of how we think about intimate relationships or sexual relationships, and sometimes, there's a variety of how we bond and connect with others that could include or not include some of these things. It is a very diverse playing field. And the Mormon church's history, right, which we call polygamy, is where a man is married to more than one woman, but that's not the only format. Maybe you can educate us on some of the different types of ethical non-monogamy that you're familiar with or aware of.
Yes, absolutely. So, starting with the term ethical itself, the way that the Mormon church practiced non monogamy in its early days was incredibly non ethical. And what I mean by that is that the women who were approached by leadership, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that isn't quite as divisive as it could be, very seldomly actually had real input into whether or not they married, for instance, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, a lot of these leadership that it was a very predatory and coercive type of non-monogamy where it was power based, where women were treated as though they were pawns, as though they were objects to be traded and sold for profit. So that is the biggest crux of it for me, is that Mormon polygamy, religious polygamy, is about property. It's not consensual. It's not about the deeper emotions between individuals who choose to have a relationship styled like this. So within non-monogamy, think of it like a big umbrella. So non-monogamy is the umbrella, and the little spokes hanging off the umbrella would be things like polyamory, where the relationship is between multiple consenting adults and everybody has or seeks to have and sustain an equal say in that relationship. Another branch of that would be swinging, where the non-monogamy is sought to be strictly physical, where your bonds with other people would be more in terms of friendship. And then once those friendship bonds are established, then the sexual dynamic comes into play, but it stops at that. There's no dating each other as it would be within polyamory. And then there are also other styles of polyamory that are more based in BDSM and things like that, which I'm not going to go into great detail about. Styles of polyamory that are based in BDSM, alternate sexual lifestyles. There's a lot of variety in it, and it's something that comes up quite frequently in talking about polyamory. There's infinite variety because each individual looks at their relationships in a different way and has varying needs.
Sure.
So it's a lot less linear than a monogamous relationship where you're dating somebody, you're married to somebody, you're just looking for casual hookups, whatever that may be.
Right. Which could be
So, but my own
fine.
personal experience is one strictly rooted in polyamory. So that is what I'm the most well versed in.
Okay. That's what I understand. And I think these other diverse forms of relationship or sexual contracting can be very healthy or not healthy. I know very monogamous relationships, missionary sex or no sex or whatever, but they can be very abusive. Not, a monogamous relationship as an institution is not necessarily a precursor to a healthy relationship.
Oh, no, absolutely. There are toxic patterns and toxic behaviors in any relationship styles, in any situations, really. And it's the thing that I have found the most important and the most helpful within my own journey in polyamory is the introspection that it has all taught me, where I am really looking at my own behavior, my own perspectives, and really doing that introspective work to be more accountable for my actions and try to grow without sitting unduly in my own feelings and agonizing about things till I'm an anxious disaster.
Give us a little bit of insight into what brought you into a polyamorous relationship. How did that door open for you?
So it's kind of a dual faceted story. I was 18 and freshly out of my first real serious relationship. And I remember very clearly walking through the university and thinking, why do I want to just date one person? This doesn't feel right. It's scary. I don't want to be everything for just one person. It was a lot of weight and a lot of responsibility. But living where I do, in a very conservative area, I didn't think that it was really, I didn't think it was, I didn't have any of the words. I didn't have the term polyamory. A lot of the language around non-monogamy is very, very fluid. It's constantly evolving, and we're seeing terminology erupt where it is needed. So the term polyamorous, I don't think even really existed in, what was it, 2008? I just thought, who's going to want to be with somebody who wants to be with other people, or who is open to that? Who's going to want to share? Who's going to, nobody is like this. So I kind of set that thought aside and kept going and made a few really exceptionally poor choices and few really good ones, and then came out of it in 2015 thinking, okay, well, that wasn't what I needed it to be, and let's see if we can try this, because I'd been doing a lot of reading and I had made some connections with people who were in polyamorous relationships and part of the polyamorous communities online, and I was just intrigued by it, by the happiness, and I felt drawn to it again and just thought, you know what, I have to try. I can't not try, because what I'm doing right now isn't working for me and I'm not happy. So I made some changes and decided this is what I have to do, and it's led me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's super fascinating, because I don't think it's easy. I would imagine it's hard enough to have a healthy and maintain a healthy relationship with one partner, let alone two. And as I understand, is from what I've read and some of the clients I've worked with, while swinging may be a very casual, less committed lifestyle in this way, polyamory takes a lot of work, a lot of communication, a lot of boundaries. Talk about that.
Oh my goodness. It does. It takes an exhaustive amount of work. And what I mean by that is, you know, first, it's the time commitment. So I have two partners, and I live with my primary partner. We share a home, we parent children together. He's my ride or die. If I was going to get married, it would be to him. And then I have another partner who lives about a half an hour away from me, and he lives with his wife and their child. So there's the scheduling between multiple families, and the way that we practice our polyamory is that we utilize what we call kitchen table polyamory, where we all seek to be comfortable and happy with each other and want to spend time together like our own little family unit, where we can sit together and enjoy a meal as a family. Now, COVID has made that difficult. We've spent very little time together over the past year, but that's what we like. The kids all play together, we can all sit around together and unwind with a drink at the end of the day. And it's cozy, and to anybody else, we look like a big blended family, which is basically what we are.
Yeah. And
So,
and it's fascinating to me because
yeah,
infidelity within monogamous relationships can be a very challenging injury to one person. But the risk of infidelity exists between two people, or any kind of relationship injury is just involving two people. But in a polyamorous relationship, there can be injury that originates anywhere in that system. And so there's more jeopardy, more risk, and there's more chance of more people getting hurt.
there is, but which is something that we have ourselves sought to prevent by being fortunate enough, thankfully, to live in a place where we can all have routine STI testing done. That's incredibly important within non-monogamous relationships, is having a solid contract in place, spoken or otherwise, about your sexual behavior. And I am a very passionate person about sexual health when it comes to non-monogamous relationships, and will go on forever about how important it is to be tested on a routine basis and also be open with your partners
A lot of
and being
transparency.
open about yeah, having total transparency with even with results that nobody really wants to hear. And part of that is also to help end stigma around diseases that are transmitted just as easily as COVID, for instance, or, the common flu, or any number of, for instance, the major factor in what causes a herpes virus to be a herpes virus is the way that it lives in the myelin sheaths around your neurons after your immune system has subdued it. It has nothing to do with your sexual behavior. It's just stress makes it flare up, and that's where the skin that it's most likely to present is around your genitals and your mouth.
Right.
So talking about things like that and being open and straightforward is really important, to decrease that stigma and to help us all to really take care of each other.
Yeah. But it does take a lot of work.
It does, and it takes a lot of communication. Our polycule, and polycule is a portmanteau between the words polyamorous and molecule. Our polycule, we use Google Calendars and things like that to communicate. We have group messages and things like that. And it's hard for us to schedule at times because my partner, we live in separate cities, but also one of my partners works out of town. They both have in the past. So time is difficult, especially because we all have young kids. And so, where some polyamorous people have chosen a certain amount of, we have chosen a certain degree of structure in our lives, where I call one of my partners my primary partner and the other partner my anchor partner, because I don't like the term secondary. He's not a secondary person to me, and I love him as much as I do my primary. But we've chosen that structure because of the kids, because it's important to us that their needs are always put first. So we've chosen where the units where we parent are going to be the cores. And then relationships between us as individuals beyond that it comes after the kids are taken care of. It comes after those core relationships are nurtured.
Right.
So, but not everybody wants that type of structure. Some people want more. They call it relationship anarchy, or it's a more unstructured relationship. There are also polyamorous relationships where it is 3 individuals in a relationship together, so a triad, or a threesome, or a throuple would be examples of terms used for that, where everybody is an equal player in a relationship where it's not intersecting relationships that interact the way it is in my own life.
Again, these different terms that people may not be familiar with, polycule and anchor and thruple, triad, they describe the diversity of how polyamory is experienced.
Yes, absolutely. Because, and again, it's that evolving language where terms are being used even regionally. There are terms that are used more frequently. For example, in places where there is a higher percentage of the population that is Polynesian descent, the term that would be used would be polyam, because poly would be Polynesian, whereas where I live, there are not the community of Polynesian people is very small. So the term poly for us, it means polyamorous as well. So it's a very, very diverse community, and language is constantly changing. Yeah, and if I go into too much of the terminology, I don't want to confuse people either,
Yeah. No, I think it's
because
important
then
just
I'll
to kind
start
of,
rambling even more.
yeah, I get it. And that's okay. I think dipping the toe in the lexicon of, intimate and or sexual or committed relationships or uncommitted relationships help to, create a discussion, at least for people maybe to have with other people or as they read about it or try to explore it on their own.
Hmm.
When I've worked with clients, it's fascinating. I think this is pretty consistent across a variety of moral dilemma. A lot of faithful members that don't drink, they've only had one sexual partner, or if they have only had one, there's maybe one or two others at most, and those are probably just teenage flings, that kind of thing. So when they reach in, or when they get into their adulthood and their faith is disrupted, they go through this transitioning faith journey, what comes out on the other side is common in that these kinds of questions are asked. Wow, I've never really drank anything. I should go taste a beer. I should go have a glass of wine. Oh, I've never done this, or I'm bored in my marriage, or whatever. And so sex, drugs, and that rock and roll and everything that would circle that, right, comes up. And I
And I'm
see,
laughing because I see this in people who are on their post-Mormon journey. I've been
sure,
very active in, like, for example, the Reddit ex-Mormon community in the past and things like that, where we see, someone kind of falls off the wagon, so to speak, and I feel horrible saying that, but, once you go over that cliff, you go as hard and fast as you can, and then you come out on the other side, and everyone's kind of in shock, and okay, I survived that, right?
sure,
So, but at heart, it really indicates that a lot of us who are post-Mormon come out of it and we're very much so emotionally teenagers, lacking in some of that overarching experience to give us that impulse control,
for sure. And I
if that makes sense.
and I understand this. I really do. And so what I see is some of my clients I've worked with, they're like, yeah, we decided to open up our marriage and do this, and it was horrible. It maybe destroyed their marriage or not. And I know some people that are practicing polyamory successfully, and I know a lot more people that struggled and it was challenging for them. And I think this is a Mormon phenomenon versus maybe other subcultures. And I
No,
think,
it's not. It absolutely is not, to be
oh, okay,
honest.
okay,
I see it very, very frequently in the polyamorous community where a previously monogamous couple starts to explore this together, and in doing so, the emotional work, the shift in relationship, the differences in attention that individual partners can experience cause a great deal of, just shifting in one's internal thoughts, and then it causes a shift in their relationship, and it's hard to reorient oneself in terms of that. So, something that has become almost a cliche would be the couple where it is a straight masculine presenting partner and their female presenting partner who's possibly bisexual wanting to explore and bring a third partner into the bedroom. So the fabled unicorn hunters, because they want to play together, and somebody falls for the other partner but not for the third individual, and it's that type of drama is, it's cliche, it's uncomfortable, but it's that cliche because, you know, a lot of us have a tendency to jump into things without fully examining, or maybe we don't want to do some of that self-reflection. We don't have those tools yet to really think things through
right.
or to work through it. Sometimes you just have to hit those stumbling blocks on the way anyways to experience it before you can really learn.
So do you see Mormons or ex-Mormons experiment differently than other people, or certainly different than what you've chosen to do? What would that be?
My own experience was is definitely unique insofar as, while I entered non-monogamy with a now ex-spouse, it was still my own desire. It wasn't, we weren't in a mixed orientation. Well, we were in a mixed orientation marriage, which is something that I'll touch on in a moment. But, it was more of this was something that I've wanted to, that I've thought about since before this relationship existed. Whereas on the mixed orientation marriage note, that is a place where I see quite a bit, or quite a few people from Mormon tradition come in, is
You're talking about
where
interfaith
one part,
marriages or interfaith couples?
no, mixed orientation, so
Hmm,
sexual orientation.
got it. Okay, I just wanted to understand what you were saying.
Yes, absolutely. So where one partner is bisexual, is gay, is lesbian, maybe questioning their gender identity, but for either reasons where the couple has decided that they still care about each other individually and they want to keep their family unit, their nuclear family intact, or whatever the reasons may be, because their reasons are not my reasons and they're totally valid. is they have chosen to utilize non-monogamy as a way of exploring that. For example, I know this lovely lesbian couple that got married this year, and they are still a family unit with one of the wife's ex-husband and their children, and they are just this beautiful family, and their relationship has its roots in non-monogamy because well, the wife is a lesbian. Delightful people. And so I see that very frequently. I'm actually an administrator for a number of, well, two different ex-Mormon non-monogamy based groups, one for feminine identifying people and one for all genders. And I'll actually drop you the links for those later, Jeff, if you want, because I'm
Okay.
sure you'll probably have a couple people ask about it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. So, in my experience, that's where a lot of it comes from, but also because when you grow up Mormon, you know, a lot of people marry the first, the second, somebody that they haven't known for as long as you might have dated them were you not Mormon, or it's a very quick marriage. I've had friends say, oh, I married them because really we just wanted to have sex. So a
Sure.
lot of that comes into play. So when you come out of it and you go through a faith transition, you think, well, geez, we've missed out on a lot of things, and we kind of want to experience them now.
Right.
So that's where another facet of it comes from.
For sure. And I think that's okay. Like, we always are wanting to learn and grow and increase the experiences that create better versions of us.
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, for sure.
I phrasing things is not my strong suit today.
No, and I
Wherever
keep,
that comes from, wherever
yeah,
you are choosing to explore that from is exceptional. The life that I live is not an easy one, but it's one that I've also found to be deeply rewarding. It does take
right.
a lot of work, but it's work that I'm happy to do because it's something that makes me happy.
Yeah. And obviously not for everybody, right? I mean, it isn't. Um,
Not for everybody.
I'm curious, like when you say it's been really rewarding, is it rewarding because being in a polyamorous relationship requires a certain amount of introspection that you find enjoyable or helpful for you? Or do you, even including that, perhaps you just find something about polyamory enjoyable?
All of the above. I have done more introspection and more self-reflection and growth in the past 4.5 years than I have done basically collectively in my life up to this point. I've learned a lot about myself and the things that I am and am not willing to tolerate and embrace within relationships, but also because I've met some really amazing people in my polyamorous communities through being parts of different discussion groups online and local communities. My anchor partner's wife is one of my very favorite people in the world, and I would love her even if I wasn't dating her husband, but I am glad that I am because I get to have her in my life too, you know.
Some polyamorous relationships, I understand, are very close. Like
Yes,
they're
yes.
very close.
Do you mean that in the terms of partners, there's overlap between partners, so it's would be
Oh, not
individuals,
necessarily, although I'm sure
or
that's
is that
true.
more just the social closeness?
Social closeness. That's what I was thinking.
Yes. Yeah, well, for us, it's become our chosen family unit. Now, there are people who are in non-monogamous relationships where, they're happy to be polyamorous, but they are more open about the relationships on their own, so they don't have a lot of overlap with their metamors. Metamor being a term for their partner's other partners.
Right.
So, but they choose not to have that level of interaction for whatever reason, and
Sure.
it works for them. But I am the type of person that I love hard and I like to be part of my people's lives, and part of that means caring about the people that they care about too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's super fascinating. And this is human nature. We seek out companionship and relationships that provide us support and safety and bring us enjoyment. And so we find that these things also exist within these terms, polyamorous relationships, as well as any other relationship.
yes.
Yeah, I find it super interesting. So one of the things I thought we could discuss, and you can bring up some examples or things that are interesting to you, polyamory, because it's a uncommon social engagement and comes with its own set of unique challenges that are notable and difficult in some cases. We also, I would imagine, some people experience some amount of complication with regards to certain mental health things, challenges such as anxiety, jealousy, depression, personality disorders, boundaries, communication problems. And we kind of talked before we got started. You're like, yeah, that and everything.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't actually see the mental health challenges that come from polyamory or are related to polyamory as being really unique to that relationship style. The thing that to me is the most unique about it is how ethical non-monogamy and the work and the circumstances that come as a result of that really throw all of those struggles into very sharp contrast. So it's a lot harder to hide from your own insecurity about, am I good enough for my partner, when you are outright saying, well, I'm being enough isn't what I want. It's I want to push past that. So it takes a lot of introspection, and it's something that I have had to work very hard at, coming from a past life where I downplayed my own needs compulsively to a life now where my partners occasionally have to really drag it out of me to have me open up to them, but where my needs are always taken into consideration and respected, and where I can speak up when I'm struggling and have people give me the space that I need and hold space for me is it's remarkable. It's incredible, and it's taught me a lot about advocating for myself and for about advocating for other people, which has also led to me talking almost exhaustively about my own mental health struggles and my issues with anxiety and depression, especially now because I have a young child at home. So
What
so it
what is
throws a
it
lot of
about?
that into very sharp relief.
No, for sure. So what is it about polyamorous relationships or any type of ethical non-monogamy perhaps that creates those contrasts so distinctly?
It's I think foremost it's through comparison, which is I've heard comparison is the thief of joy as as a frequently used saying, but it's a lot of it comes from there, from seeing, you know, so my partners are attracted to me, but they're also attracted to this person. So what does this person have that I don't? Or how are they like me? How are they different to me? What draws my partner to them as well? So it's a lot of that, but it's also, as much as humans are pack animals, we're also possessive, jealous, anxious, neurotic blobs of jello shot through with electricity. So
I love your description.
so it's survival instinct. It's survival instinct.
Yeah.
We look at other people and anything that disrupts our daily life as a potential threat, so we analyze it to see where our weaknesses or where their weaknesses are and how we could be hurt or vice versa.
Yeah, I see, and I'm sure that you're aware too, in my own personal experience, we seek out coping strategies to help us regulate certain challenges that we experience in our life. Most of the time, those are probably healthy for the vast majority of people that choose them, but sometimes we can overreach and actually, do things that, while it may be a band-aid for something, is causing us more difficulty. And I think relationships are like that.
Oh, absolutely. So I frequently see that with, as I had mentioned earlier, the unicorn hunting couple, the mixed orientation couple, or the couple that's exploring and wants to try bringing an additional partner into their lives. And part of why this is such a looked down upon practice is because at its core, it really, ignores the fact that this third partner is, in fact, a whole person who is not just, a walking sex toy on wheels. If they are an individual person with needs and with feelings and with a life that is not strictly and solely dependent on their relationship to these two other people bringing them into their lives. They didn't just, materialize when these people decided they wanted them.
I'm also really curious too, because I've seen this where culturally our Mormon past informs us that there's other ways in which people have practiced marriage relationships,
Mhm.
polygamy. And so unlike other cultures, not all cultures, but unlike most other cultures, like the thought of anything but monogamy is never considered appropriate, or it's not something that people would think about. Is there a propensity generationally where we find ourselves being more open to stuff like this than what others from other backgrounds and cultures may? What do you think?
I think it's more of a generational shift in terms of the millennials and exennials and beyond making that shift more so than it is the cultural distinction between Mormons, because Mormons tend to get very defensive and very up in arms about polygamy, which is partially due to a lack of education, I feel. The true history of, I don't know if you've listened to the Year of Polygamy podcast, but it is phenomenal. And it really goes
Fantastic.
into the really nitty gritty details of the Mormon Church's history of polygamy and the way that it was used to be coercive and create that really power hungry mindset. And all of the really dangerous toxic fallout and the layers of damage. So Mormons tend to get very jumpy about non-monogamy. And, if say someone's from a polygous, we're Mormons, but we're not the kind of Mormons that marry each other's wives. Especially because there are communities that do still practice religious polygamy as well.
Right.
But I think that between the overall societal shift that is happening right now in terms of people becoming more friendly to alternative relationship settings,
Hmm.
but also this at its root very committed to family and, kind of a deep stubbornness, I guess you could call it,
Sure.
is where a lot of that Mormon shift comes from. But yes, there are definitely people who are more open to the idea of non-monogamy because of polygamy. But to be honest, though, I would really recommend people who are interested in non-monogamy because of the idea of multiple wives do some self-work and find out why they are pulled to that, and if there's something that they are missing in their lives that they need to work on before they start to bring multiple people into things, if
Yeah,
that makes any sense.
absolutely. I totally agree. And I think you're right. I think, as an example, the LGBTQ, the changes that we've seen socially and legally to allow for marriages between same gender partners occur, I think is a phenomenal step forward in terms of and again, this diversity that exists. I've asked this question. Well, so what's next? Are we going to see the legalization of polyamory? What would that look like? What do you think?
It's actually funny that you mentioned that because on November 23rd, I think it was 2015, a court in, was it Newfoundland in Canada, legally effectively ratified a polyamorous union where three parents were put on their child's birth certificate, the gestational parent and then the two non-gestational parents, as opposed to just the parent who gave birth and the parent who they contributed the sperm, so to speak.
Yeah, accommodating the
Um,
diversity
so
that exists.
shifts like yeah, so I think that shifts like that are coming, but there's also a lot of very complicated factors that come into play with the legal representation and the legal acknowledgement of plural relationships because you know things like welfare systems and
Mhm.
pensions and disability programs. So it might really be symptomatic of us seeing almost a shift away from traditional marriage, as it were, at least in the United States, for its affording people protections because they are legally married. For instance, my primary partner and I are not married, but we have a child together and we have a family together. But because we have a family together, the government in Canada doesn't really care that we haven't legally signed the paper. The only thing that's affecting is really my last name, if it comes down to it. Otherwise, we file our taxes together, our incomes are considered collectively for anything to do with the kids or anything to do with our taxation. So I think that shift is hopefully coming, because it would make things a lot easier, and then people would be able to step towards, you know, marriage being more a reaffirmation of their own relationships to each other, and bringing in whatever deity that they want to, as opposed to it being a contract with the government.
Right. Give us some information that would be helpful. There's going to be somebody at some point that may listen to this podcast and say, "Yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about trying, or a road I wanted to go down, or I'm in the middle of this." Give some of our listeners, and it's a
Mhm.
small percentage, but give them some suggestions. What would be helpful for them to know?
So when I got into polyamory, when I first started doing research and investigating to see if this was a sustainable thing for me, I started with, of course, the internet, sitting right at my fingertips. So I looked on Reddit. There's a number of good resources. I also read, there's a number of books out there. I know that More Than Two is one, although one of the authors has been problematic in the past. The Ethical Slut. There's also Sex at Dawn. And what was the other book that we were talking about earlier?
Well, Esther Perel in her book Mating in Captivity has a whole chapter or two on ethical
Yes, that one.
non-monogamy.
Yes, Mating in Captivity. But really, my primary resource is the community. Even on Facebook, there's quite a few polyamorous groups. There are pages that are run by poly communities, poly individuals, lots of podcasts. Those resources would be my first step, but also, to make sure that you have the resources to do that reflection, to be guided in that reflection. So make sure that you do have a good therapist, or are willing to ask yourself those hard questions, even if you don't like the answers that you come up with. If you can self-therapist yourself, I guess.
Right.
Don't expect to be able to bring somebody else into your life in a healthy way, have healthy polyamory, so to speak, unless you're willing to be brutally honest with yourself too.
Yeah, and for individuals that are seeking for a therapist, I would, at a minimum, make sure that the therapist that you're working with comes from a very strong sex positive perspective in their clinical demeanor.
Hmm.
And if possible, I would suggest finding somebody who is ASEC certified, because they're going to have the training, which is almost like another master's degree or more in sexual issues and all the stuff. So, yeah, opposed to just, well, my therapist, which
So
could be
would
fine.
that be on the Psychology Today website?
So most sex or certified sex therapists will add those letters to the end of their licensure letters. The other way you can go is to look at that up is
Hmm.
to go to asect.org and simply find a provider and someone that may be in your market or state. But you can also ask, if you have a strong relationship with your current therapist, you could say, "Hey, I'd like to work with somebody who is ASEX certified, or someone who is very sex positive, because I'm wanting to explore polyamory." If that provider does not feel competent to do that, and I would think in many cases they probably wouldn't, they may find more value in finding somebody who does. And it doesn't mean that they have to abandon their current therapist, but this is a very specialized type of you want to get someone who knows what they're doing. I guess that's what I'm saying.
It, it's a very unique little niche.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Well, these are really great resources. Thank you for providing that. What would you like to add? I don't know if I've asked you maybe everything that is important to you, or where you might have something of interest to you. What would you like to share that we didn't talk about?
No, I think that we've really covered basically all of my bases. I'm gonna, send you a few links later so that you can include them in the blurb for this podcast if you'd like,
Yep.
in the subtext, so that people can check links out. I'll see if I can find some more good resources on non-monogamy. It's a daunting thing to look at. It's a daunting place to be, and opening up your marriage is terrifying. There's a lot of ways that it can go wrong, but there's also a lot of ways that it can go right. And I was talking with a friend this morning about how, since they and their spouse have pursued non-monogamy, it's really led to them being a lot closer and being, that more assured in their bond, because they know how well they work together and also can appreciate what they have to offer other people as well.
Yes, I've seen this. Like I said, I know of couples that are really enjoying having diversified their family system, right? Whatever that is for them,
Mm.
and they do it very
Yeah.
successfully. I think everybody could learn from this community, right? This vast, oh, I don't know, it's late at night, so my tongue's not working very well, but there is a larger community globally of people that are experiencing ethical non-monogamy. And I think that the monogamous among us could learn a lot by opening up dialogue and
I
right? Because think about how even monogamous relationships would benefit by incorporating the types of things that you're suggesting.
Oh, absolutely. And especially things like how to talk about your own insecurities, your own jealousies, and to understand your feelings and how they relate to your partners. But, what's the difference between jealousy and envy? Envy is wanting something that somebody also has, but for me, jealousy means that you want it for yourself and for them to not have it. So am I really jealous of something? Am I envious? If finding out, it helps you really get to the root of why you're feeling the way that you are, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
That level of introspection and unwinding what's really at the root of those feelings is something that it took a really long time for me to learn how to do, but it's one of those things I'm going to use every day for the rest of my life.
Beautiful. I love it. Andrea, thank you so much. I can't express how happy I was to hear that you were open to having this conversation publicly. And I knew that you had been involved in other public forums to some degree, so this wasn't a new experience. But for you to contribute to the community which I serve, I think is just fantastic. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you again for having me. This was a lot of fun. I will make sure that I send you those links, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how this all comes together.
Very good. Send me a link also how people would contact you. If they have questions for you specifically, maybe they would be able to find you on a particular social media platform or link. And if you send that to me, I'll include that in the show notes and people can find you that way. Does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I will make sure that I have contact information in there too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles, and as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth.
A trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on, like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth. Some people say love is blind and forever is too long. But I see your eyes in every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go, all wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary. It's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary. No, it's extraordinary.